All right, we'll call ourselves to order here with what we have. We're a bit short on quorum at the moment, probably caught from snow or something, so we're gonna move things around a bit. So starting off with approval of the agenda, what we have as a proposal is start off with some of our Parks and Trails Legacy Fund presentations for our information item with whatever staff are present at this point. Not all of them are here yet, but we'll get through those. They may show up, otherwise we can come back to it later after business items, but just so we can hopefully get a quorum here before we get into our business item. Does that sound good to everyone? Okay, so we'll do that as modified. Just swap information item up. Then we'll take the approval of December 5th meeting minutes. Which also, yeah, thank you, Sandy. We'll also come back to those. Says that, I always forget that requires a quorum. Public invitation portion of our meeting for interested persons to address the commission on items not on our agenda. Do we have anyone registered?
No.
We do not. Okay. So then we'll dive into our information item, the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund for FY 26-27 project reviews and equity highlights. Go ahead and tell us about that. Find that in our packet here.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. For the record, I'm Jessica Lee, I'm the planning analyst in Parks. And I'll start with a little background on Parks and Trails Legacy Fund for the newer commissioners. Hopefully some of them will watch this later that aren't here. The Minnesota Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment was passed in 2008. Resulting in additional sales tax revenue for clean water, outdoor heritage, arts and culture, and parks and trails. 14% of that total revenue goes to Parks and Trails Fund, of which the Metropolitan Regional Park System receives 40%. The Met Council receives an appropriation each biennium to pass through to the regional park implementing agencies. Our estimate for the fiscal year 26 and 27 biennium is about $55 million. Of this, 10% is set aside for the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund, and the rest is allocated to the agencies. So to prepare for the 2025 legislative session, we've asked the 10 agencies to put together a project list using an estimated allocation. These lists are subject to change, but they help provide talking points for the session and give an idea of the types of projects that will be funded. So today, the park agencies will share their list of projects, as well as highlight at least one project designed for equity. Each agency will present for about 5 minutes, and then we'll have a couple minutes for questions after each speaker. And I'll let them introduce themselves as they come up. And first up, we have Anoka County.
Good afternoon. Glad you all made it so far. My name is Karen Blaska. I'm the park planner for Anoka County Parks. And so for the 26-27 legacy funds that we are allocated, which is about $4.5 million. We've got 4 projects. First one is at Bunker Hills Regional Park in Bunker Beach Water Park. We have a pedestrian bridge that goes over our lazy river to an island that has another activity pool and some picnic areas and things like that. But because it's, of course, over fluorinated water, the bridge has not lasted as long as we had hoped, so we will be designing and engineering a replacement bridge for that. The next project is park improvements at Bunker Hills, and this is part of a larger redevelopment project in Bunker, so getting roads, parking lots, trails, building improvements, all that stuff upgraded. So this is, I think, the 3rd funding phase of this. And we're expecting, I think, 2 more funding phases to get that done. We, of course, always do our agency-wide natural resource management request for funds to either hire conservation corps or hire staff to help us get ahead on our natural resource management tasks that we need to do. And then our last project is at Rice Creek Channel Lakes Park Reserve, reconstructing a playground out on our beach at Centerville Lake. It's plenty old and in need of reconstruction, and this is actually the one we will be, is it just forward? Yes. Focusing on for our equity highlight for age and ability. We are excited about this because we have a partnership with a moms group who have kids with disabilities, and they have been fabulous with sharing ideas, asking questions, and working with us on other projects. So we're super excited to get them really involved in helping to design this playground. And so, yeah, we're just trying to bring some awareness through this, get specific design ideas from them. The picture that's shown there is actually a small playground we did out at Wargo Nature Center where we worked with them, and they gave us specific components to add and other suggestions for improvements around it, like the fencing and things like that. So we're excited to work with them on that. But that would address our age and ability equity focus for that. And I would stand for any questions.
All right, any questions, commissioners?
Pretty straightforward.
All right,
All right, easy enough.
Okay. Next up, we have Carver County.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Sam Kurtz, Carver County. Nice to be with you this afternoon. We've got 4 projects here in 26-27 tied to legacy, 2 of which are continuations of past projects. They're positions, FTEs, our recreation volunteer specialist position, and our forestry and maintenance supervisor position are both partially legacy funded. The third project is really our outreach grant, which has a couple buckets, 4 buckets that we have focused the outreach dollars towards. I'll unpack that here a little bit in a second. That's our focus in regards to equity. The fourth project is what we'll call phase 1 redevelopment for Baylor Regional Park, and I'll foreshadow a little bit because it will come through MPOS certainly, probably about a year from now is kind of the trajectory. But Baylor Park will be, we're starting a long-range plan update for Baylor Park here, essentially next week. And so our fourth project here for legacy is a redevelopment phase 1 for Baylor Park in concluding the long-range plan update. Again, with respect to outreach funding and our equity focus of reaching youth, a couple good examples here. Our outreach funding is really broken into, I'll say, additional labor resource where we can bring on additional employees to reach more, serve more program and event opportunities beyond what the county's resources are. As an example, we have a picture of archery program that we're doing with schools in the school year, where typically some of our seasonal labor is returned to college, and now we're able to work with a different set of instructors and different employee base in the school year that allows us to again reach youth throughout the year in different ways. We've been able to increase our delivery of recreation services, particularly in field trip ways to school groups and to I'll say nonprofits that are serving maybe underrepresented populations, particularly folks that aren't with some kind of cognitive or physical limitation. We're working a lot with those groups today, and that's tied to our outreach grant. Aside from this, again, tied to youth as an equity goal, our equipment rental services have been funded partially through the outreach grant in terms of equipment and the capital investment there. So everything from stand-up paddle boards to kick sleds and our rental services throughout the year have been touched by that legacy grant. All that stuff is well and fine, but you gotta tell people that you have it. So also our legacy is bucket related to communications, and so we've been able to do additional work targeting, again, families mostly, where we can provide our marketing materials and promotional materials to make people aware of services, of course. And lastly, again, tied to outreach, we're excited to continue another year of what we call our equity fund, which is a portion of the outreach dollars we get are earmarked for essentially a reduced cost for groups to participate in our recreation services. Again, that's modeled after, again, trying to target towards underrepresented populations, whether it's economic reasons, whether it's schools that are part of the free reduced lunch program, and some of those metrics, again, cognitive, physical disabilities, those groups would qualify for our equity fund, and so our outreach grant dollars are earmarked towards that as well. So, any questions?
Commissioners? Yes, and this will also apply to some of the other agencies that have these, when you're doing staff positions with the legacy dollars, you have some that are ongoing year to year, but coming out of kind of a single time pot of money. Do you have sort of different goals for like this year, we hope this position accomplishes specific things, or are they kind of the same thing year to year mostly, or a little bit of each? Kind of how do you break that down in the grant application rationale kind of stuff?
Sure. It's a good question. I guess in terms of the grant rationale, I'd have to get back to you on that in terms of what we're specifying year over year with the grant application itself. But certainly in terms of work programming, a lot of times it's an onion. What did you peel back last year, and what's the next layer you're peeling back this year? Some of these things take, multiple phases to kind of, I'll say, reach the end. In terms of who you're serving and the next door that you could open to serve people in a different way, or another group of people in a different bucket. So a lot of times it's come through work program. What did we advance last year? What can we get into this year that continues to kind of further the goal? And both those positions certainly have plenty of healthy work programs in Carver County.
Yeah, it's probably not something you can get within, our 5 minutes here, but in our communications to the public, it would be nice if we have a way of saying like, these are the kinds of layers of the onion we addressed last year, this is what we're doing this year. I know all the legacy stuff, you have to submit reports to the LCC and whatever goes up on there. I'm hoping that there's some of that level of detail there.
Correct. If I can add to that, yeah. So in our reporting, we're showing, of course, I'll say, for example, people we serve, number of people we serve in that year over year change in growth. Often it's been growth increase. That's a good way to describe that. Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Okay. Thank you.
Next up is Dakota County.
Good afternoon. Mindy Geisler, our Parks Director, wishes she could be here, but she's sick today, so I'm filling in her position. I'm Tony Luscombe, the Greenways Manager for Dakota County. So I'll start here with the first three projects here are actually kind of continuations. Our agency-wide Parks Outreach Coordinator. This is a 5-year ongoing position. Anna Ferris has been leading this position for the last 5 years. Indigenous Liaison, Jeff, this is new. This is a part-time position. Which has been excellent though. He's kind of rushed into at least 3 major projects in full force and really been a highlight of engagement and relationship building for the county as well as our projects. And then certainly the outreach program support, that's certainly something that Anna Ferris and her role has helped support again for the last 5 years. And then if we go to the next slide. We have a couple major projects here. So Lebanon Hills and Lakeville Regional Park Campground Buildings Beach House. We just completed design for this one. It's a $1.6 million project. We'll be starting construction here soon. And then a plant propagation program and University of Minnesota Extension Partnership. Really this is kind of a build of we have a new hoop house and plant propagation program that we're having with our Lebanon Hills Maintenance Shop, which is basically to double our plant propagation, and which will help support really our county's native propagation as well as what we support for volunteers and throughout the system itself. And then I'll go on to the next slide. And in terms of legacy, this is kind of Anna Ferris's program here. A couple major pieces here throughout her program from 19 to 24. She's had over 853 different outreach activities. She's engaged over 33,000 people, 19,000 adults, almost 14,000 youth under 18. And then in terms of the Spanish language individuals, almost 11,000 people. So that's just her program in 5 years. That Anna Ferris and her program has helped engage. And it's just been an amazing program that continues to grow year in and year out. That we couldn't be more proud of her and her program. It's actually something that she represented and led a presentation, I think earlier this year, to the Parks and Trails Legacy Committee as well. So her, Jeff, as well as Nikki. So that's great.
Right. Any questions?
Excuse me, I was kind of curious about the Indigenous liaison. And so I'm just kind of curious how that works. Do they read the documents and give you suggestions? Or
So
how does
Jeff,
liaison work?
yeah, Jeff's role at the county is really to be an amazing conduit between the county as well as our Indigenous partners for projects. It's really kind of a project-specific piece for, we have Springwood Park projects as well as projects along the river, and those are kind of the two main projects he's been involved with. And really kind of be the conduit between the two, in places where we didn't have that partnership before. And build relationships where we didn't have them before. It's been his main role and responsibility, and it's part-time, but what we found out is part-time isn't enough. And that's something that we've really struggled with, and what we're really trying to do is make that position full-time. I know that there's Indigenous liaisons at the county or at the state level, and it's something that we're starting to look at here with our county board as well as within the county to get his position full-time, because we see the value beyond just parks, that it's an important piece at the county level holistically, so.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Arvidsson. I'm the Director of Strategic Planning at the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. It's a pleasure to be with you here tonight. For the Park and Recreation Board legacy projects, I'm going to divide them into kind of two categories on the first two slides. The first category are these 7 projects that you see in front of you, which really are a listing of parks. So the way that the Park Board selects projects throughout its entire capital improvement program, both neighborhood parks and regional parks, is that we have a set of empirical equity metrics that prioritize capital investments by ranking parks according to certain factors about the site, the parks themselves, but also the communities that surround them. And so we invest in those parks and bring them into the CIP essentially when their numbers come up. So the parks that you see here, these 7, it's essentially their turn. These parks do have adopted long-range plans. And so then what we do is when we get a bit closer to initiating that project, these are, after all, fiscal year 2026 projects, so we're not quite ready to start yet. We actually re-engage the community to determine exactly what out of the master plan the community would prioritize for us to build. So for instance, at Central Mississippi Riverfront Regional Park, which is here on the list in front of you, it's hard for me right now, sitting here today, to tell you exactly what we're going to build. When we initiate that project, we're going to consult with the community, we're going to consult internally with our own staff, and then make prioritization efforts there. I've been indebted to the great staff here at Metropolitan Council in figuring out ways that we can be compliant with grant requirements and descriptions while also making sure that we're giving that space for community engagement at the beginnings of projects. There's been some really creative thinking by Jessica and her colleagues. And so what I have to present for you today is essentially a list of projects list of parks within which we will be doing some kind of implementation in line with those parks' long-range plans. Additionally, we have some projects that are a bit more defined at this time. So there are 4 projects that we're looking at that have more specific goals that I can tell you about right now. The Grand Rounds Missing Link implementation is a big one, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment with our legacy, our equity highlight. But essentially, the Grand Rounds Missing Link is about implementing trail corridors in a place where there have not historically been trail corridors. The Loose Line Regional Trail Plan implementation. The Loose Line runs from Theodore Wirth Park and actually connects to the Three Rivers Loose Line and then comes down into the city and connects to the Cedar Lake Trail. It is perhaps right now one of the most circuitous and difficult to follow regional trails in our entire system, which includes on-road riding and curb hopping and all sorts of stuff. We are working to acquire a portion of a rail line to make that trail much more easy to navigate. So this is actually the second allocation. There's one that's a couple years old also that we are utilizing to both acquire that line and then start putting down trail. Northeast Diagonal and Ridgeway Parkway, both are small regional trails. These are primarily rehabilitation projects, so dealing with pavement, signage, visitor comfort facilities. So those are both existing trails, and we're just gonna try to kind of bring them up to snuff because they've been in a while. So those are our 11 different projects for fiscal 26 and 27. An equity highlight that I'd like to bring up is the Grand Rounds Missing Link, which we expect to rename the Bridal Veil Regional Trail after a historic creek that did run generally in this area. What's important about this particular regional facility is this is a gap in the Grand Rounds that has existed since long before there was a regional park system. In fact, it was envisioned in 1883 at the founding of the park board and has never been implemented. So today, there's no way to get from the end of St. Anthony Parkway up on the northern end of that map down to the Mississippi River. Northeast, southeast Minneapolis, particularly in this location, are lower wealth than the region as a whole. And in particular, the university area skews younger than average. So it's actually in the university area, as you may probably gather, you get a lot of those 18 to 24-year-olds that we know is kind of a gap in regional park service. So both are, we're looking at age and income in particular, age and income as being equity highlights here. But really park access for all folks is kind of the big deal. You can see on this map, even if we put our local parks on this map, the green ones, and I apologize for having omitted St. Paul's excellent park system just to the east of us, but you can see there aren't many parks in these neighborhoods. And so connecting this trail and actually having trailside amenities and kind of wide spots in the trail in places more of a greenway corridor will allow for us to provide that park service. There was a 2-year planning process to determine the preferred route, and we are actually in the midst of doing schematic design right now. The state, through some direct geo-bonding, also has supported this project. We're using a variety of funding sources to make this happen, including local park dedication funds. We think there will be segments of this under construction in 2025 and 2026, and so the 26 and 27 fiscal will continue that momentum going forward, and we'll build segments as they're able to be built with many of our project partners, including the University of Minnesota, Hennepin County, MnDOT, and the city of Minneapolis, many of whom own the right-of-way in which some of these trails will exist. And with that, Chair and Committee, I stand for questions. David.
Yeah, thanks for that. First of all, I applaud the missing link, particularly in this case. I think that serves a good need that, and that's entirely consistent, I think, with what we all are all trying to do is link up our parks so that they're better used and able to reach populations that we have heretofore not been well in serving. I'm just wondering about the 7 that you started with that have undefined asset improvements or whatever those are. Do you have at least an idea of likely suspects that you would be hitting in those cases? Things that have come up in previous years that maybe you could correlate or kind of guess at?
I think Chair Russo, and it's been a while since I've been at this space here. I'm trying to remember who's who. Sorry, Chair Russo and Commissioner Yates. It depends. It varies a little bit by the park itself. So in a park, for instance, like Theodore Wirth, there's a lot to do, and so I think that one it's really a bit wide open. We've heard some things here that are important to folks in the park. That varies significantly, and we'd never be able to do everyone's priorities, and so that one's very kind of up in the air. And You know, we may be in a situation where we'll do community engagement for 4 to 6 months before we actually even scope a project. In other places like Minnehaha Regional Park, which has a master plan that is almost entirely implemented and probably ready for an update, I might note, there's less that we're going to be able to do. I think there you're going to see a lot of investment in some of the historic infrastructure that is beginning to fail in that park that dates from the 20s, 30s, 40s. We're dealing with some of that now, but there will be definitely more to do. The walls and stairs that really draw people to that park but are not in great shape. The North Mississippi Regional Park, we're creating our long-range plan right now. We're in the midst of that, so we're kind of out. We're doing the planning right now, and then we're putting this in so that we can follow that planning with an immediate investment. But in that case, we don't even know what will be desired in the park and what will be the adopted plan. So it would be impossible for me to prognosticate in that case. So the short answer is it varies by park, but in all cases, we would do a community engagement process to help determine that scope.
Yes, Cecily?
So the renaming of the grand rounds, was that something that came from the community? To call it Bridal Veil? You know, I think of Yosemite National Park with the really dramatic falls there that are called Bridal Veil.
Yeah.
And
Chair Russo, Committee Member Harris, yes, it did come directly from the community. And I should clarify in the midst of this, we're not going to rename the Grand Rounds. In Minneapolis, the Grand Rounds as a big loop does have multiple segments that kind of have their own names. So we do have Minnehaha Parkway, we have West River Road, those are all parts of the Grand Rounds. And so the vision here is that this segment of the Grand Rounds, which we currently call the missing link, hopefully won't be a missing link anymore. And so it needs a better name. And
no,
Bridal
it's a great
Veil
project. I was just afraid you were renaming the whole grand rounds.
No.
I misunderstood the.
Yeah, my apologies for that confusion. No, we're not renaming the entire Grand Rounds, just this segment.
Great. All right, thank you.
And our Bridal Veil is a little less dramatic right now. It's kind of a storm sewer outlet, but still we can conjure that grandeur.
Yeah. I was wondering some of the history of this, obviously being identified 140 years ago and not happening until now is a little unusual. Is there something technically particularly difficult about this segment? Or is it more political history of like who lives there and who's served and how prioritized it was?
Chair Uriso, those are excellent questions. I do think it's both, and I think one follows from the other. So I do think that conspicuously the gaps that were left in the original Grand Rounds are here and on the riverfront of the Mississippi in North and Northeast Minneapolis. So we don't have to know much about the city to know that those are the areas where folks that were not allowed to live in other places in the city were forced to live. And then they were not provided the same amenities as folks living near the chain of lakes or Minnehaha Creek or West River Parkway were. Alternatively then, those areas which were not set aside for parks were allowed to industrialize. So you do have a follow-on effect of some of that deliberate segregation of the city that led to an industrial landscape that is much harder to acquire, harder to put trails through than other types of land uses. So you get very large parcels with massive pieces of infrastructure. Just think of the cement plants on the riverfront in northeast Minneapolis. Think of the Upper Harbor Terminal, which is just now transforming in North Minneapolis. And here you have significant industrial areas that we're trying to wind our way through. And I think then you also have sitting right in the middle, well, sort of the bottom third of that, you've got a massive active rail yard that we have to cross. So it is a technically difficult corridor. I think we're going to try to probably philosophically build down from the north and up from the south, and that bridging of the rail is going to be the last piece that we do. But the simple answer to your question is yes, I think it does have to do with social policy from the early part of the 1900s, which resulted in a land use pattern that is very difficult through which to build trails and parks.
Okay. That's good for an equity highlight then.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Good, thanks.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Sue.
just have to note that it's really good that it was called the bridal veil portion of the grand round instead of the garter belt, just. Bad joke. Bad joke.
Go ahead.
All right, good evening. My name is Scott Yonke. I'm with Ramsey County Parks. I'm the Planning and Development Director. We have 8 projects that we'd like to present here tonight, as well as the equity highlight. So starting out on our project, so we have Bad Snail Lakes Trail improvements. So that project is basically reconstructing trails within the Snail Lake section of that park to be more resilient with flood result for that park. Much of the park has been flooded for quite some time, at periods of time. So we're looking at trying to make the trails more resilient for community to use it and to enjoy the area. The second project that we have, or the second and third project are located in Long Lake Regional Park. So Long Lake Regional Park does have a lot of aging infrastructure. So we're looking at updating a lot of that. We're looking at updating a lot of that park just with pavement, infrastructure, utilities. So that one is likely going to take several phases to complete, but it's a much needed improvement. The Long Lake Boat Launch, that is another facility that we are looking at upgrading the boat launch. Now, that is a very heavily used boat launch, and during the winter it is constantly getting with a lot of the wind that is coming in and ice, and then during the summer with the high use of that, the concrete planks and the parking lot area need improvement, so we're looking at upgrading that facility. The Battle Creek off-leash dog area, so we're looking at updating that facility as well. We've had previous projects for some of our other off-leash dog areas within our park system. So this is the second phase, and so for that, but the parking lot that's at the Battle Creek off-leash dog area is it's a very aged infrastructure. It's not in great quality right now, so we're looking at replacing that entire parking lot there. And then we're also looking at continuing our regional park and trail sign implementation through the park. So we've had a lot of success so far that we're looking at new graphics, different ways to approach language, making it more visual for the community. So that's another project that we're looking at. And then the last 3 projects, these are tied to FTEs. Well, actually, not all of them are. The conservation courts is where we're looking at doing a lot of natural resource improvements through the park. So that's a continuation project that we've had for several years. The outreach programming and then the volunteer coordinator are tied to FTEs. The outreach programming is really looking at trying to advance recreation opportunities for people of color and low-income users through our regional park and trail system. And then Tamarack Nature Center volunteer coordinator that's looking at expanding the volunteer group with the Nature Center. It's an amazing area. It requires a lot of help, so a lot of involvement with volunteer individuals is much needed. And then our last highlight here is for our equity project is we've been rolling out a lot of new signage within our park. We're also updating signage at our boat launch facilities. So many of our parks have boat launches today. The signs are very old and sometimes they're hard to read, they're hard to navigate. So we're taking a different approach for our signs that involves a universal design for accessibility, for the age, ability, and national origin,
as well as on emphasis on useful information over rules, which creates a welcoming environment. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of our signs are old, so that it's the traditional, the old brown signs. They have zero visual information on them right now, so they're very hard to navigate for individuals, as well as the maps are they're more useful and easier to understand. For example, on some of the images, we're providing more graphic information so people understand just around the area how to use the site, as well as we're providing more icons over language, because the icons are much easier to understand if someone does not understand English. And then lastly, we're just putting more color and more visual appeal to our signs to enhance them through our park. Any questions? Yes.
The boat traffic moves in counterclockwise direction. Is that only for motorized? Is that for paddle boards or canoes or?
Predominantly, we like to see the boat traffic move in a certain way so people understand. So it's what we're trying to avoid is when you have multiple boats out on a lake and are going different directions, so they're all going the same direction. So we like to try to accommodate the boat and recreational use the same way, just to avoid implications on the lake.
I hope that's not true in every county, because when I go on a lake and I see motorized stuff, I steer clear from them and I go in the other direction intentionally, so I don't get hit.
Well, and realistically on this particular
I am turtle.
your paddle boards and stuff are mostly just staying down here.
No, I like to
Most people-
circumnavigate lakes.
Yeah.
So
a little-
to have
Less-
to go counterclockwise seems kind of odd, unless the wind pattern dictates it. Huh.
If you're paddling, I believe you still have the right of way.
As if people know.
Jet skis.
Yes, sir.
Chair and Commissioners, I don't know if this is accurate, but Ramsey County did win National Recreation and Park Association Equity Award for some of the signage work you did.
Correct.
And will this be part of that effort?
Yes, so part of that effort, we totally revamped all of our signage on how we wanna, how we're designing it, how it looks to the community, taking a lot of feedback from the community on what is useful and what's not useful. So for example, the graphic that you have here follows a lot of the outcomes that we had developed through that project.
Great.
Nice work.
Anything else? Sue?
I don't even know if this is a question that should be asked, but I'll ask it anyway. What about as it relates to Braille? Folks who maybe, pardon? Yeah.
That is something I don't have an answer on right now, but I can get that information back to you.
I'm not, from a disability standpoint, that is one area where I think there might be a concern. I would guess that many times when people do have a vision disability, they're going to parks with others who can assist them with that, but I don't wanna make assumptions, so that's why I feel a little uncomfortable even asking the question, but I think it would be good to know whether there is an issue there that needs to be addressed.
I can follow up with some of our coworkers to find out if that was part of the development of graphics, or how they anticipate approaching that in the future.
Thanks.
And I thought you were gonna ask about the ability, age, and race of the dogs in the dog park. Maybe not.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Councilmember, Commissioners. My name is Paul Sawyer and I manage grants and government affairs for St. Paul Parks and Recreation. And to talk through a little bit about our projects, the first is we have been working with a community skate group to develop a skate park on the east side of St. Paul and have identified East Side Heritage Park along the Bruce Benter Regional Trail as a great site for that. And so this will be the public portion of that project, and that will hopefully catalyze some private fundraising that will complete that project. Down on Harriet Island, if you've been down there, the promenade along the river has seen better days. It's subject to flooding and just 30 years of age, and so it's time to redo that, and particularly as we have seen a lot more programming down there. We want to make sure that that's something that can work for the future of the island. At Hidden Falls Crosby Farm in 2019, we did a new long-range plan for the site, and so this will continue to implement the projects in that plan. At Indian Mounds, I'll discuss this a little bit in a minute for our equity highlight, but this will be updating or replacing the long-range plan for that site and starting with the implementation of that. At Sam Morgan, Lower Landing, you've seen some projects come through here before. We're gonna be reconstructing the Sam Morgan Regional Trail in various places, but including through Lower Landing next year. And so this will be the opportunity to continue connecting elements in that park to the newly reconstructed trail. And so the sport courts under the Lafayette Bridge are the next thing on that list. Phelan, we have completed the design work to reconstruct the picnic pavilion along Phelan on the West Shore and to do some improvements in that area. And so that will construct the work that we've been engaging the community on. And then to talk about the 4 programming things for our jurisdiction-wide grants. The first is long-term vegetation maintenance. And so what we have found, particularly with our protracted droughts and hot summers, is we've been having a really hard time with our projects getting native vegetation to establish. Usually, you know, if we have a 1-year warranty period after we construct a project, you know, some other legacy project that includes vegetation, we're having a hard time getting it to thrive long-term. And so this is a way of concluding the main project, but also having up to 5 years of maintenance on that vegetation so that we're gonna have a little more success, hopefully. Great River Passage, this is something that we've been funding for several years now. This is really focused on all of our riverfront regional parks and bringing people to the river, having them learn and experience outdoor skills and recreation that's more tied to the river and to some of the floodplain forests down there. The Volunteer and Education Coordinators, again, is a program we've been funding for a long time. So these 2 staff positions are, one is focused on volunteer programming throughout our parks, but is centered at Como Regional Park. And then the education coordinator is doing a lot primarily with our BIPOC specific programming. And so that work continues to grow and develop, and so we're really excited to continue funding that. And then finally, I'll mention the Como Shuttle. If you've been to Como in the middle of the summer, you know how sometimes it gets quite busy, particularly on the weekends. And so in an effort to not pave over all of the green space immediately next to the zoo, we've been operating for many years now a shuttle from satellite parking lots to bring people in, keep the car traffic down, and make it safer for pedestrians and a more pleasant entrance into the zoo. So for our equity highlight, I want to start by acknowledging that Indian Mounds, as we know it right now, is a space that is a cemetery. This is a place where people have been buried for millennia. And St. Paul Parks and Recreation for over a century operated this space for recreation. People walked on the burial sites, people played on these grave sites, they picnicked on these grave sites. And that is a really tough and just really bad history to this space. And it's rightfully been something that has caused a lot of pain for many people in our community. And so we had a project that sort of served as the inflection point for that history, and since that time, we've been working to kind of undo that harm, to start repairing that harm, and change the way that this space functions so that it still is available to the public, but it's still, or that it's acknowledging the sacred and cultural significance of this site. And so we completed a cultural landscape study in 2020. That was the result of a lot of partnership with indigenous communities, and that was tribal governments, it was tribal historic preservation officers, and it was the local indigenous community in St. Paul that worked on that project, and really, they have been in a leadership role. This is, about as high on the IAP2 spectrum as you can get in terms of really leading how we are stewarding this space moving forward. And so we did some initial work removing trails from some of the areas where there had been burial sites, removing some features so that we're really keeping the recreational activity in areas that are less sensitive. We've been doing some natural resource work, planting native vegetation there, and doing a lot of messaging work, and I'll show you a couple examples in a second, to recontextualize this space so that people that are coming here understand the setting that they're in, and are giving it the appropriate amount of respect. Unfortunately, so we've been working under this 2011 long-range plan, and we've been working within what has been prescribed in that, but it is a recreation-focused plan, and we're quickly reaching a point where the work that we need to do that's identified in the cultural landscape study is now going to be at odds with the long-range plan, and so we need to do a new plan. We've arrived at this point. We're extremely thankful for this commission and the council as a whole for supporting the creation of cultural landscape classification. That absolutely is the proper reflection that this is a space that has regional visitation, is extremely important from a cultural standpoint, but should not center recreation. And so the new plan would be in tandem with that cultural landscape classification, and identifying how that space is gonna function long-term. And so, like I said, it's built off the cultural landscape study. If you haven't read that, it's a few hundred pages, but it is a good read. But it identifies a lot of concepts of how the future of the Indian Mountain space is gonna function. And so a lot of that is gonna be reflected in the plan. There will be additional community engagement. And that will be brought in as an official long-range plan for the cultural landscape. Additionally, it's going to be an opportunity to establish a new name. The Indian Mountains, currently Indian Mountains Regional Park above, and the nature sanctuary below where the Wakan Teepee Center is being constructed is, part of this important Dakota site. And so it'll be looking at what does the Dakota community feel is the appropriate name for this site. It may be two different names, it may be one name, but this long-range plan would start to define some of that. And then we can bring that back to this group to share what we've been hearing. And so, as I said, here's a couple of examples of some signage that we have up. So it's, the signage work has been, I think, really powerful, and it really, it's all throughout the park and definitely provides the missing context to how this site, what this site is and what its history is. So I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Yes, David.
Thank you for that. I guess the question that I have in mind is, I understand, the nature of having to redo a long-range plan, and it was effective for this while, but with that increasing sensitivity and understanding that, that's understandable. I guess my question is, I don't, it's probably not the first time that this kind of thing has happened, unfortunately. And so I'm just wondering, as you build a plan like that, is there something else to lean on? Obviously, there's a community that can provide you with direct input as to like how to work, and if you need to move a path or move some structures, whatever that is, to be able to observe and keep the space free of those things. But I'm just wondering, is there any guidance that can be encountered, either because other park systems have already done that work and maybe similar enough that can be borrowed, or if it's worthwhile if that hasn't been established? And I'm still new, so there may be something out there that I just don't know, but it just seems to reason that there may be some sharing opportunity here to be able to work with other systems on coming up with some kind of joint ideas on what is considered good practice, best practice, whatever.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Yates, I appreciate that question. And so I'll address a couple of things with that. So first, I mean, we will be the first out of the gate with this new cultural landscape designation. So we're gonna be working with Emmett and his staff to figure out how that's gonna function within kind of the Met Council process. Our staff have, been meeting on an informal basis with other agencies that are working on Indigenous issues. So there is a lot of sharing that's happening. I know the council also has the American Indian Advisory Council. And so a lot of the members on that are people that we have been working with on this project. So there's some overlap there. So, we're always looking for ways to partner and figure out how to do this. But in terms of the Twin Cities metro area, some of this is fairly new. But I will also say that with the Bruce Fenton Nature Sanctuary, the long range plan, I believe, was adopted in 2008, and that was a plan that we knew at that point already was a culturally important site, and so that was reflected in the plan, and there was always the intention to build the interpretive center down there, coupled with there being a natural resource emphasis. So, we've sort of done a similar thing with that space as well. So, we're always looking to share what we learn and to learn from others, and we've spoken about this work nationally. And so, that's kind of where we're at right now, but all of this work is driven by partnerships. And the relationship building that we've done with the TIPOs and the tribes for the last several years has really been critical to doing this work correctly. Like, we know we're on the right track because we have these relationships that we've cultivated and that we're able to bring ideas to them for feedback and guidance, and so that will continue as well.
Thank you for that response. I wish you well in that journey.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to recommend, if it's possible, for us to find the handout that was a part of the meeting we had, I think, was it 2 years ago?
Yeah.
When the St. Paul team came and presented on what you were, kind of a preview of coming attractions sort of presentation about Indian mounds. I think it gives a good history, and it also provides information as to how they've done this planning. They've engaged a lot with the Indian community, and I think that handout would be real beneficial.
Chair and Commissioner, I was just gonna say that I was thinking of the exact same thing. Council member. Frankie Jackson, the
Yes.
Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, was here and talking about lessons learned more broadly and how they're applying them in this instance. I was on a call yesterday with Paul's team and Adam over there and Adam's team talking about naming protocols in terms of renaming, or I don't know what to say, returning to the old name or whatever it was with Tracy, and we, so we're all learning it together in the space, and the idea was, how do we expand this conversation to the broader regional parks partnership, because there's just a lot of learning going on right now that would benefit a wider audience, and the agencies are really out front in a lot of this work right now, so absolutely.
Yeah,
I was just gonna ask one more quick question. Where is the East Side Heritage Park, skate park going to be? What, is there a location, a specific location?
So, Mr. Chair, council member, are you familiar with East Side Heritage Park?
very.
Yeah, we have not located specifically where in that park it's
Okay.
going to be. We have an existing legacy grant to update the long range plan for that park, so that will identify where it will be. But
Okay, got it.
understanding that, you know, this is an effort to revitalize this park, get more people down there and eyes on it. It's gonna be visible from the road.
Okay, thank you.
Cecily?
I should know this, but for Samuel Morgan, the construction of sport courts, I didn't know if legacy money could be used for sport courts.
It's been a changing target.
Chair, it's been an evolving thing. Sam Morgan is a linear park along the Mississippi River, like you know, the trail. And it does go under things like the Highway 52 bridge. And so some of the amenities in that area that don't, you know, that are gonna be a little bit non-traditional. I think there's discussion about maybe a skateboard park or futsal play. This is something that did come through MPOS a couple years ago, if I
I do
remember.
recall that.
Yeah,
And I thought we would carve out sections of regional trails or regional parks that had features that weren't eligible for funding. Maybe it is eligible, I don't know. It just surprised me to see that.
okay. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I had some questions about what that meant too, but I think we probably go beyond this presentation.
But any amount sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yep, Scott County's up now.
Hi, Patty.
Yeah, sorry.
Hello, thanks for having me. My name is Patty Freeman. I'm the general manager for Scott County's Regional Parks and Trails. Good to be with you today. I forgot how to plan in a snowstorm. I left out. You guys are a little behind schedule, looks like. So I'm here to talk about the county's four-season pavilion that is planning to do with the next biennium for legacy funds. You could call this a four-season pavilion, or we're calling it a gathering space. And Scott County is actually in the process of determining what is the best location for this facility. They're looking at 3 different parks. So one of the parks is considering the Spring Lake Regional Park, and that's located just on the southern end of the city of Prior Lake. Doyle-Kennefic Regional Park, which is located in central Scott County, and then Cedar Lake Farm, which is in the very southern part of Scott County. It's also in the very southern area of the whole metro regional park system. And the facility is planned to have a large group gathering space along with complementary amenities like a prep kitchen, restrooms, that sort of thing. So it's an infrastructure project, and we feel that it can help one of those parks in becoming a more welcoming and accessible park for a number of reasons in a few different ways. First, just kind of speaking to one of our more robust data sets, the most recent council visitor study, which isn't actually recent, it's from 2018, but it is the most recent. We understand from that report that amongst new park visitors as well as amongst persons of color, that meeting with family and friends is really one of the, I think it's the top interest actually in popularity. And then I would also say that it's probably pretty well established that park visitors of color, which we really understand remain underrepresented in many parks across the regional park system, tend to cite an interest in gathering in groups with family and friends to celebrate is a reason to come to our regional parks. So this proposed facility would support group gatherings of that sort with space available to rent. And we do feel like providing this type of facility that is not otherwise available at these parks or in the nearby surrounding communities, with the exception of Spring Lake. There's a little bit more of that opportunity nearby, but certainly not in the other two parks that I named. But we believe that it would provide an opportunity for those parks to become a little bit more attractive, a little bit more welcoming to those new park visitors and persons of color. And then in addition to gathering space, this facility, regardless of where it would go, is envisioned to have restrooms that would be available to all park visitors. So it would be an amenity that would be available, or a restroom that would be available, not dependent on, is there someone in the building, is the building being rented? It would be available to all users at the park during park hours. We do understand that bathroom and water access were among the top improvements suggested by respondents in that same visitor study, the 2018 visitor study. It's also interesting that at that same time, so 2018, Scott County did a general population study, hiring the Morris Leatherman group. And in that study, which didn't just look at park visitors, but general population, modern bathrooms with flushable toilets, surprise, were the top ranked facility that people were interested in. And then interesting, this kind of interesting connection, our partner Three Rivers Park District conducted a visitor study that's during that same year for Scott County residents. And we discovered that we have several different gaps in usership, but one that's of interest is for people 18 and younger. There's a gap in that age group participating when you compare it to the county's population. Or the county's resident makeup. And there's no modern bathrooms at Spring Lake, there's no modern bathrooms at Doyle Kennebec, and Cedar Lake Farm has pretty limited facilities. So one of the things that we're envisioning for this facility is that it's in a small way, but we think an important way, could create a more attractive experience at one of these parks for families with children and youth. And then the final impact that we would intend or we would hope to see with this is related to programming services. In that general population study that I mentioned in Scott County, having increased programming was among the top interests in the community. And then when asked about ranking priorities, future priorities for where the county should invest, investing in programming opportunities and facilities to support more programming also ranked among the top 3. So our long range plans for each of these parks does call for some sort of rental facility as well as some sort of programming facility. And right now we're really hoping that we can bring those elements together, have a flexible space that has different elements that can kind of meet all of those things. At 2 of those facilities, it could be that we look at having that facility in a renovated barn, or it will be a new facility, and our master plans do allow for either of those. So that really concludes the remarks that I wanted to make, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission might have.
Okay. Any questions? Yes, Chris.
Yeah, I was just curious, so it looks like a pretty big place from this photo. Would it be something that would be multiple, if we had families coming together? Is it just one place to rent per time frame, or could it be divided into smaller ones? We have 3 or 4 families or something like that, so is it just one, you know what I mean?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Commissioner, thank you for that question. We've only done we've gotten to the schematic design phase. We did consider whether it would be one large space or separated into little spaces. It's gonna depend on what park it's gonna go into probably. The space that you see right here allows for one large group, anywhere from theater style, I think this would fit like 160. But we're finding that there's really more of a demand for people sitting at tables, and this size would fit about 65 to 75 people. if this facility were to go into Cedar Lake Farm, we would be looking at how do we make this concept serve both. Can we break it out, or can we have a larger, one large group? There was quite a bit of discussion amongst the team that when you do try to have a space that serves one giant group and then split it up, it's hard to make that work really well. It doesn't mean it can't work, but that was something that we had discussed, yeah, so it's undecided at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right, thank you.
Good evening, I'm Jonathan Fleming, the Associate Superintendent for Three Rivers Park District. I specialize in planning, design, and technology, and oversee that division. I am here today with our tentative list of 2026 legacy projects. I say tentative because we do a 5-year capital investment program or improvement program, a CIP. But it's only the very first year of each of the 5-year programs that we do annually that is then officially approved by our board. So right now in December, they approved a 5-year CIP for 25 through 29. And then they also approved an asset management program for 2025 itself. Consequently, everything in 26 and beyond is tentative. Some things can sometimes get bumped if higher priorities emerge. But these are right now what we believe to be our planned expenditures of the legacy funds for 26 and 27. There are 20 projects. I'm not going to read through all of them. I'd rather spare you that and instead focus just on some highlights and some summaries. You'll notice that there are 8 rehabilitation or taking care of what we have projects listed. That's a very important concept for our board, and typically within our CIPs, at least 50% of the CIP is focused on rehab. There are 7 regional trail projects within this, 2 of which are for new regional trails, the Bryant Lake Regional Trail, and then its sister trail, the Eagle Lake Regional Trail. Both run north-south, they connect to each other, extending all the way from Bryant Lake and Eden Prairie through Minnetonka, eventually up into Plymouth, and then beyond through Maple Grove and further points north. Those are very exciting trails. We have federal grants for those. We are augmenting the portion of the project that is not fundable through federal grants with legacy funds. And then the other 5 regional trail projects are rehab trail projects. There are 4 natural resource-based project categories, which are actually 2, but they're repeated 26 and then also in 27. One is for district-wide contracts for forestry and horticulture, and the other one is for district-wide contracts for water quality improvements. These are things that are above and beyond what we typically do. We do have a natural resources department. It's quite large, and it's sort of the natural resource expertise for the entire county. And this allows them to go above and beyond what they can normally do by using legacy funds. And then we have one sustainability project. It's for a solar roof at Galewoods Farm. Galewood Farm is a working farm. It teaches people about food to table concepts, and we wanted to add a solar concept to that as well, and we'll use that for education. In total, we're looking at about $12.3 million in projected legacy funds for the 2-year biennium. And it's going to help fund about $41 million of projects. Our overall CIP for the next 5 years is budgeted at $139 million. The state provides about 38% of that funding, largely through the legacy program, for which we're very grateful. We are very conservative in our estimates of state bonding funds and don't expect more than a $5 million bond every other year. And if we get that, we're considered lucky. I don't like to count on state bonding money when making plans. About 22% is through our own bonding program. We, as a standalone special park district, have bonding authority, and we are planning on bonding a little over 41 million over the next 5 years. And then 10% of our funding for our CIP comes from local matches, and that's typically really Hennepin County helping with the regional trail projects. We are in the process of building the active transportation network throughout suburban Hennepin County, and Hennepin County is an important party in that effort. I don't have a slide on equity. That's because none of these are standout equity projects. Everyone has some sort of equity component, in particular the rehab ones of like Minnetonka. But the equity component is really limited to ADA improvements and making things more accessible. In the past, we've done massive investments in equity projects such as Mississippi Gateway Regional Park. Completely reconceptualized that park, raised it, and they're rebuilding it to the tune of about $40 million. That is going to open with a soft opening, hopefully later this year, and the official opening is currently scheduled for a year from spring, though it may be earlier if we're lucky. That park is really designed to bring people who have not been to nature-based parks before into the concept of nature-based parks through both physical design as well as programmatic design. The other thing I want to talk about is Bloomington. I'm here representing Bloomington today. At our December board meeting, Three Rivers and Bloomington entered into a partnership where Three Rivers will now manage Bloomington's regional park system units. Both their 3 regional trails as well as their units of the Highland Bush Anderson Park Reserve down in Bloomington itself. And we will be doing pretty much everything: natural resources, day-to-day operations, maintenance, design, programming, planning, grant management, you name it. What we typically do for ourselves, we shall now also be doing for Bloomington. And we're very excited about this, as is the city itself. We believe that the efficiencies are made when we merge like this, and to the tune of about 50% in savings of efficiencies. It also allows us to bring our expertise, in particular to natural resource management, to their park units. And this slide shows those park units. It's kind of hard to see on the wall like this, but there's a little star showing which units are the Bloomington units. The big green one is Highland unit. That has historically been run by Three Rivers. Most of the other ones are actually Bloomington units, including the very popular Bush Lake Beach. And then there are 3 trails as well through Bloomington. These are some pictures of Bloomington's facilities. And so what are our projects for the legacy? I don't know yet. We just agreed to take this over. There's about $800,000 in legacy funds for the next 2 years. And one of the first things we'll be doing one of the many things we'll be doing in 2025 is doing a facility assessment. And we got to take a look at the pavement, we got to take a look at the trails, we got to take a look at the buildings. I know the old beach building, which is no longer used, is in rough shape and needs to be repurposed, probably raised and rebuilt. I don't know if that'll be our first project. So we're very excited about this. We now partner with Scott County, and we also now partner with Scott County. And if Carver County was here today, I'd invite Marty to partner with us as well. We would love to see that happen too. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Questions, commissioners?
Just a simple curiosity, but on the earlier slide, you had a couple lines on forestry operations or something like that, and horticulture. I'm just wondering, like, it is, because the CIP and the way you budget for more capital items, like, that sounds more like ongoing operational kind of stuff.
We've had this debate internally as well. In these cases, these are for, well, the way we define a capital project is it needs to be greater than $10,000 in cost, and it needs to have a shelf life of at least 5 years. And so in this case, if we hire a company to come in and do a prairie restoration for us, we consider that a capital investment.
Okay.
What they're not doing is going and cutting a tree limb here and a tree limb there. This is different kinds of contracts.
Thank you for this.
Great, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So it turns out that Washington County can't make it tonight, so I'm gonna wing it here.
Okay.
So it looks like they've got 4 projects. A trail extension for Hardwood Creek Regional Trail, filling in a gap. So improvements at Big Marine Park Reserve, including access, natural resources, recreation and trails, St. Croix Bluffs Regional Park campground improvements, and the Central Greenway Regional Trail Lake Elmo segment feasibility study. I'll just leave it at that. And then their equity highlight is for the Hardwood Creek Regional Trail Extension. This is their most visited trail, and they're going to address a 1-mile gap in the regional network. I'm just gonna see, he sent over some notes, if there's anything I need to mention. It connects with other diverse areas of the region in Ramsey County and Anoka County, and it will allow for an accessible path for users of different abilities. It will be separated from traffic to navigate through this area that is currently residential frontage roads and commercial areas. That's about it. I probably can't answer too many questions in this one.
I was, of course,
Cecily.
go ahead.
I'm confused. What's the Washington County line for that extension? There's Bald Eagles in Ramsey, right? Oh, it is right
Little of
there.
each.
Okay.
Mhm.
Got it.
But my question on that, last I checked in on the Ramsey County side of that, things were still in development. And they weren't entirely sure of where that county line meetup was going to happen. Is the Ramsey County line side of that actually decided, do you know? So that they know that they're building to where it's gonna go?
The northern Ramsey County line is County Road J.
County Road J.
I say, that says proposed future trail here, is this alignment decided?
Is this the Vento Trail coming to the north?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Vento Trail is coming to the north, and Hardwood Creek Trail is from north going to the south. So the plan is to meet up at County Road J.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to make sure that they are actually going there or not. Because I think there was still like 3 alignments being debated for where Vento would go, last I heard.
Right now, the phase 2 of Bruce Bento would be terminating at County Road J, which would be on the west side of Highway 61.
So is that still rail trail there? Or previous rail?
So some of the stuff further north that you
Because
see,
61 definitely is.
there's some bits of this that are on former rail, and then there's some bits problematic down here that are still currently used. So both the Ramsey County bit and some of this have had to go other places to bypass the rail that's not being given up.
Where it jacks out.
Yeah. You saw this more when we talked about the Vento stuff in Ramsey County, where the original idea back, I think this is like 80s, they thought, oh, well, as soon as the railway vacates, we'll put it there. But the railroad that's using it has said, we don't actually have any plans to vacate that at this point. So they're redrawing things to figure out another plan.
Alright, well, I would just like to thank all the agencies for being here tonight. We really like seeing you, and thanks for sharing.
So,
Before the agencies leave, I have a quick question, and if there isn't time or information tonight to answer it, that's fine, but I've been a little fixated on what's going on in the Los Angeles County area. And I heard some reference to both state and national parkland really being torched in the last 2 days. And I wonder, what kind of emergency preparedness do our regional parks have as it relates to interactions with municipalities and your county partners in the event of some sort of a catastrophic event, whether it be a fire, a hurricane. I know you deal with, a lot of you deal with flooding on a fairly regular basis, but what types of coordination are done in advance so that you're not scrambling to try and come up with a plan?
Well, I know County has an, emergency services division, and so they do coordination amongst all our county departments and the cities.
And they include
So-
the parks and trails?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
good.
Yep, that's the same in Scott County.
Good.
I would have to dig up information or bring other people to talk more about it, but on a pretty regular basis, they're updating emergency plans and, yeah.
Well, I don't mean to sound like a negative.
Nellie.
Yeah,
How's
that's
it
right,
going?
thank you. I had an aunt, great aunt Nellie, and I hate using that phrase because there's nothing negative about her, she's a wonderful woman, but I just always kind of worry. And I know because we've dealt so much with flooding that has tended to be our emphasis, but we've got a lot of other risks. And fire becoming more and more one of them as we deal with drought here in Minnesota, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll bring that up with our emergency manager, services manager. I'm sure they thought of it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the response scenarios have talked about like ravine sloping
Yeah.
or because of rain or flooding. And it might be nice to bring in the idea.
Well, and I live just south of the southernmost part of Battle Creek Regional Park, and if a fire were to start there, it would go fast. I mean, it would move very fast, because it's wooded, and I don't, other than a couple of homes on the very east side, it's all grassland and trees, and a small parking lot, a couple of small parking lots for the dog park people. So it's just something that I spend too much time.
And that also ties into the cross-agency coordination
Yes.
stuff of, if you do have something like a fire and it crosses the county line, do the plans adequately address handling the multiple agencies of that? And if we go outside of Met Council jurisdiction, do we handle that? I know the state has been doing a bunch of revamping of emergency planning kind of stuff, and they recently got funding for a new emergency operations center. What does that look like at the state level? Obviously getting way beyond just parks there, but there's probably some things that we have planned well and some things that maybe we don't.
Well, then we have a nervous Nellie and a nervous Nicholas. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, part of my job gets to be planning for the IT failure part.
Oh.
So. Okay. Well, that information item went well. Unfortunately, it still wasn't enough for us to actually get a quorum, so we're proceeding without, apparently. So for the minutes, we'll just push that off to a future meeting and come back to those. For business items, we'll still hear presentations and discuss them as normal. We just won't be able to vote on them, unfortunately, and we'll pass things as a consensus feel of the room, and our liaison can communicate any further details that go with that. So with that, I guess we'll move on to what our business items are supposed to be, starting with accepting of public comment report and adoption of the Imagine 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan chapter. Several staff tell us all the things. And I'm gonna go see if I can get coffee. And thank you all of those various staff. That was actually quite
Well, I know we have a little disruption now, so let me just start by saying, Chair and Commissioners, thanks for being here today. I am sorry we do not have a quorum today. some people were late cancellations due to emergencies or just, Bob didn't want to drive in the snow, which is completely fair. He is watching online and texting us, and he and Monica gave their full endorsement of the policy plan. They were the two commissioners that asked for hard copies to be mailed to them, and we did that. And so, while that doesn't officially get us to a quorum, it, conceptually gets us to a quorum, so I can live with that. I hope you can. So let me just jump right in here and say we are very pleased to be here with the Imagine 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan, the final draft. It's been over 2 years, this process, and we have made great progress together with you. We have been heavily reliant on the expertise and advice of the regional park implementing agencies, our council members, and the broader community. I wanted to say that as part of this effort, we have teased apart the Parks and Trails Planning Handbook, which we'll get to next. But we're really committed to continuing with the Parks and Trails Planning Handbook, making it better. This is the version, 1.0. We know that there's work to be done there. So, next slide, please. Thanks, Kevin. So a collaborative process, that is the truth. This has been highly interactive, and it has been driven by your engagement, broadly speaking. We've discussed that the external plan engagement has really focused on prioritized communities that haven't been well engaged in the past. And they have been an important part of this process. We started with a strong policy foundation. I look at the Parks and Trails Policy Plan today, and it's really been a document that's evolved over the 50 years of the regional Parks and Trails system. So we have a good foundation on which we built. We've made it better. We hosted 8 agency council work groups focusing on the key topics of the plan. This work fed directly into the development of the plan. Back in May 2024, we released the 60% draft plan to the Parks and Open Space Commission and to agency staff. We got a tremendous response to that. We came back in August with what I call the 90% but the public comment draft. And again, we had a really good response. We've had an amazing art and policy project team on this. The picture you see there is flags that were made during some public engagement, several public engagement events. Our past 2 MPOSC meetings, we have shared the public comments on all aspects of the plan. Overall, I feel very confident this has been a strong and engaging process. And now I gotta stop talking because let's get into it. This is not a long presentation today. So I'm gonna pass it to Tracy to talk about the beginning of the plan.
Good afternoon.
Before you continue, I want to make one quick note for our commissioners and anyone watching online too. You saw 2 very similar looking documents. One of them has the final language alone, the other has a red line showing the changes. So if you weren't sure that both of those exist, they do. Go ahead, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners, Council Member. Good evening, good afternoon. So I'll be presenting sections 1 through 3 of the policy plan, and Colin and Kevin will move through the rest of the policy plan. So section 1 of the policy plan provides an overview of the system, including the roles and responsibilities, funding, and existing conditions. The new items for section 1 include updated system facts. These facts detail the number of regional parks and trails in the system, as you can see, as well as the trail mileage and parkland acreage. Highlights include 2 regional parks have opened to the public, including Anoka County's Coon Lake Regional Park and Scott County's Doyle-Kennebec Regional Park. There are now 46 regional parks open to the public. One new regional trail is now open to the public, which is St. Paul's Grand Round North Regional Trail, for a total of 56 regional trails. And to close, more regional trail segments are now open to the public for a total of 487 trail miles. Section 1 also includes added content to the system vision, mission, and objectives, values as well, added language related to the state of the system, which is also existing conditions, and lastly, language introducing and referencing the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook was added. Section 2 of the system plan. This section includes the lists and maps of all the regional parks and trails in the system. The new items in section 2 include new policy and 3 actions that focus on maintaining data, maps, plans, policies, processes, research, and applications. The special recreation feature classification was modified to special features to include a range of subclassifications. And a new cultural landscape subclassification was added. Next, there are updated system plan maps and tables defining what's eligible for regional support. And finally, the estimated cost to complete the system was updated with a new total of $3 billion. This estimate was moved from the finance section to the system plan. Section 3, natural systems. The new items in this section include new policy and 3 actions focused on identifying and protecting natural systems land in perpetuity. The locating and the acquisition policy and strategies was updated and reframed within the context of natural systems policy. And lastly, systems additions factors were added. These include natural systems foundation, geographic distribution, and equity. So this sums up sections 1 through 3 of the 2050 policy plan, and now I'll hand it off to Colin. We'll take it from here.
Thanks, Tracy. I'll be covering the next 3 sections of the policy plan, including climate resilience, which you see here, planning, and system protection. Whereas the natural systems section represents a combination of new and reframed policy and actions, the climate resilience section is brand new. The climate resilience section includes a new policy and 4 actions that promote resilience to climate change and outline commitments that focus on key council responsibilities and priorities, including partnership and collaboration, research, increased public awareness, and equity and environmental justice. Like the objectives that Tracy referenced back in section 1, council staff have worked hard to develop and strengthen the connections between regional goals and the policies associated with each system. With regional goals focused on protecting and restoring natural systems and addressing climate change, it should come as no surprise that the 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan has elevated these critical topics. On to section 5, planning. What's new for 2050? Council staff proposed moving some content to the planning handbook, restructuring some content, and clarifying different types of plan amendments. Council staff also strengthened the connections to the planning handbook within the policy plan. As a result of these changes, the planning section in the policy plan is a little bit shorter than it was in the 2040 plan, but the guidance provided in the planning handbook is more robust. 3 sets of planning-related content are proposed to reside in the planning handbook, including the details of long-range plan requirements and plan amendments, as well as the Joint Powers Agreement strategy. Like other sections, the narrative within the policy plan provides the foundation for the more detailed content in the planning handbook. On to section 6, system protection. What's new for 2050? Well, first, the narrative related to action 2, conversions, has been streamlined and clarified. Next, a couple of strategies that lived in this chapter of the 2040 policy plan are proposed to be moved to the grant administration guide. Those strategies are reimbursement for contamination and environmental site assessments. Finally, the language on regional wastewater infrastructure, which sits under Action 4, placement of utilities, has been updated to be more consistent with council policies and practice. none of these proposed modifications represent substantial changes to this policy. Rather, the proposed edits are intended to improve clarity and locate content where it seems to fit best. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Kevin to talk about Section 7.
Thank you, Colin. So the next few sections will be Section 7, Section 8, and Section 9. Starting off with Section 7, this portion of the policy plan includes the policy for recreation facilities and programming and its 6 associated actions. So some of the changes for 2050 include reorganizing some of the actions to emphasize or elevate key topics. One of the instances was the first action has been modified to increase or elevate equity in programming activities and places. Some other key actions that were added to this policy include new actions that support partnerships, outreach, collaboration, and raising awareness. We also have other actions that discuss increased trail system coordination, and another one that also promotes more flexible criteria for assessing recreational activities and facilities that are eligible in our regional parks and trail system. And that was done through modifying the actions and removing a static traditional activities list and instead switching to that criteria-based evaluation for recreational activities and facilities. As I had mentioned previously, we also work to strengthen our commitment to better coordinate the regional trail system with the regional bicycle transportation network. And in addition to that, we also added a new action that further clarifies ineligible recreational activities and facilities. Moving on into Section 8, this is our finance section. Some of the key changes for 2050 include reshaping the finance policy language to kind of underscore and emphasize the importance of collaboration with our regional park implementing agencies. Another key change was working to further distinguish the differences between statutory requirements and council actions that are specific to this plan. This policy has 6 associated actions. And some of those include a formalized commitment to the Equity Grant Program, increasing park acquisition opportunity fund caps. The legacy fund would be increased from $1.7 million to $2 million, and the ENRTF would be increased from $1.7 million to $3 million. And this would mostly be accounting for increased costs. And then in addition to that, there's also a new action for the council to actively analyze regional funding budget strategies to pursue increasing funding and support. And then last but not least, Section 9 is the 2025 to 2028 work plan. A lot of these items within this section emerged from engagement with our agency council work groups by gathering feedback from you, the MPOS commissioners, as well as CDC and other Met Council staff. Overall, these are items that we hope to begin implementing or exploring in the next 4 years. And in this work plan, we've identified 17 different items to look into for the 2025 to 2028 period. And these are organized into 5 different buckets, which include accountability and research, protection and restoration, culture, trails, and finance. Some of the highlights for this work plan include continuing dialogue around special feature subclassifications, more specifically around the historical landscapes and open space or natural system subclassifications, the exploration of the establishment of a cultural resources inventory requirement with, in collaboration with our regional park implementing agencies and in consultation with American Indian tribes and communities. Creating a more coordinated and integrated regional trail and regional bicycle transportation network system, and continuing our discussions around strategic funding that were initiated during the policy planning process. Now I'll pass it over to Emmett to talk about next steps and the proposed action.
Thanks, Kevin. So what's next? Well, we're hoping that you will forward this Imagine 2050 plan to the Community Development Committee, which is meeting on January 21st. And there it will be joined with the land use and the housing policy plans, and ultimately forwarded to the full Metropolitan Council on February 12th for their consideration for adoption. So that's the plan. We did put this little tagline, I'm gonna say spring or maybe early summer. We're gonna be working on performance measurement that we want to include in the plan. So we were not able to get that during the regular planning process, but it's already underway, and stay tuned. Next slide, please. So here we are, the proposed action. That the Metropolitan Council accept the public comment report on the Imagine 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan and adopt the Imagine 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan chapter. It's pretty simple. With that, we would be happy to take any questions or comments that you might have, and we would also entertain a motion.
Well, we can't take a motion, but we can take a suggestion or something.
We'll make it sing.
We'll talk
when we
until
get to
we're
it,
done
yeah.
talking and then figure it out, yeah.
Thank you.
Comments, questions, anything, David?
I just wanna say, well, first of all, a lot of good work that went into this, so thank you for bringing it this far and allowing us, I guess, the privilege to be a part of helping in whatever small way, but clearly some very big stuff that happened in here. I just wanted to say on these slides, I love the photos. Thank you for including them. I mean, we're all at the point now where we're already kind of done with winter, a lot of us, but these, bring to life the fun part of it, so thank you.
Cecily.
All these questions, and I probably should have asked them a couple months ago. And I have a page number for each, so on page.
Excuse me, is it the strike-through version or the clean version? And maybe you don't know.
The
and we'll
clean
figure it
version.
out. Okay.
Yeah. So page 29, there's sort of a paragraph about regional trail attributes. And I could have sworn there was a conversation a while back that there would be a description of a water trail. Was it there?
Oh, we did talk about that idea.
So that was my first question when I was reading that. The other one is, it lists a variety of modes of non-motorized recreational travel. And I saw the word canoeing. And when I go to Square Lake, which is the second closest regional park to me, I see more kayakers and paddleboarders. So again, region-wide, maybe canoeing is more common, but I'm seeing more of the others. So maybe you just say paddling or something, but maybe it's too late for that.
It's never too late, Cecily, but whether we can change it now or we can change it when we update it.
It's just a minor question, maybe it's a trend that, canoeing will never go away, but I think for other.
Where, is that on the same page or a different page?
Well, I don't know, when I was reading, I jotted down page 29.
You look under use.
Under use.
Oh, got it.
So then moving to page 59, purpose and use. Will the regional park and trail system ever be complete? Is 70,000 acres enough?
Well,
That
what an
word
interesting
complete kind of
question.
bugged me.
Well, there's an existential question. There's
Or maybe it's
completion
in the
of,
5 years chunk of time,
Yeah.
getting up to 70,000 in 5 years. But being complete,
and there's the question of completeness of what's identified in the plan versus completion of what will be identified by the time we complete the stuff that's
well, the
already in the plan.
aspirational,
Yeah,
is it ever complete? I don't
probably
know.
not. Maybe there's a different word for completion of what's already in here. But, yeah.
Chair and Commissioner, the cost to complete the system is something that's called out in legislation.
Okay.
But I totally agree with you that no, it's never gonna be complete, and like with the taking care of what we have and the need to restore and redevelop to meet new and emerging needs, we don't have that many park search areas, couple, but we have a ton of regional trail search corridors, so.
Right.
And I don't see that slowing down either, to
Right,
be
and I was
honest,
just
so.
looking at the map, and Dakota County doesn't have an awful lot shown. And, you know, maybe over time, a huge farm could become available and another regional park could happen. But again, it just caught my attention, so I brought it up.
Good.
Then, on page 86, there's a bullet, offer recreational opportunities for all users. And as someone over the age of 65, I am still frightened of electric bikes. And, you know, the various places it says that some of the implementing agencies allow electric bikes on trails. I thought we were going to have a regional policy, or is that just in the parks?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Harris, I could jump in on that one and turn your attention to section 9, work plan. One of the 17
What
items
page
that
is that?
is at the very end, right before the appendix.
98, 99.
98, 99, thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Mullen. Yes, indeed, there's an item specifically called out for investigating e-bike use on regional trails. And if you've got it handy, Emmett or Commissioner Harris, you could provide that specific language. I don't have it right in front of me, but we've called that one out specifically because of the concerns raised around this particular topic.
Item number 12. We're thinking of it,
Well,
Cecily.
good, because, you know, a lot of seniors, if an e-bike hits a senior, they're gonna be broken bones.
Yeah.
Not a pretty thought.
On your point about completion, we don't necessarily need to change it in this, but
No.
for the future, I'm looking at the statutory language, because I wondered if they actually use that, and it looks like they don't. It actually says, estimate the cost of the recommended acquisitions and development. So maybe we'd be better off just using something closer to that language, the cost of recommendations would more accurately reflect what we're really saying.
Rather than completion. It's a good point.
Well, I just hope it's never done, I mean.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I mean, the needs will always be changing.
Yeah.
Even if it's not making it bigger, it will change, and change will cost something. Yeah.
Thanks, Tony.
Okay, and then on page, just two more. I took a lot of them out because of the presentation. On page 90, it says, in general, regional trails should be developed away from roadways. And in some cases, there could be short stretches located on or adjacent to a road in order to bypass natural artificial barriers or private property. What about going through residential neighborhoods?
Absolutely.
They're allowed?
Yeah. Chair and Commissioner, I think regional trails function to connect where people live to where they want to go, including our regional park system.
And we have a few around me that go right through residential areas.
Well,
Vento
Glacial
Trail.
Hills is gonna go right by my house.
The Vento Trail goes through a significant portion of residential areas.
But it won't, they don't propose to improve it, so you'll be kind of on a sidewalk for part of it, and road for part of it. The houses are really close to the street, it's a county road, but anyhow, it hasn't come to you yet. I think it comes in, is it March or April? Glacial Hills.
Oh,
I don't know.
something, it's coming soon.
And last question, I could be totally wrong, page 98, you know, one of the future projects, what I think sounds really cool, this develop a cultural resources inventory. I was at a strategic plan recently, I was co-facilitating it, And a Dakota man in the room said that he found the word stakeholder offensive based on cultural views on how decisions are made. You know, decisions being made by elders and not, anybody can be a stakeholder and decision maker. And again, not being Dakota and not totally understanding it, we revised the strategic plan we were working for a specific nonprofit because the word stakeholder offended him. And I don't know if that's something anyone else has heard. I wouldn't have guessed it.
Was there an alternative term chosen instead, or
Decision maker?
community member?
Yeah, we used decision maker instead, but. And again, I mean, stakeholder is a word used in government and nonprofits.
Well, Allison might be a good person to talk with about that, Emma.
And it may be just this one individual had a problem with the word, but.
We have a tribal
That's what he was
tribal
just explaining to
liaison
me.
in community relations who would be a good resource on it.
And, yeah, cause I'm thinking that there is a difference between how we use stakeholder and decision maker, in that the people we currently call stakeholders are not necessarily ones that are empowered to make the decision, but we want them to inform the decision. And if we went to just decision maker instead in our context, that would potentially sound like it's excluding the people that are not in the position of formally deciding it.
Right.
So I don't know that I wanna do that one, but
Well, I guess,
something,
you know, again, it depends on how the word stakeholder in this
Yeah.
sentence is intended. But anyhow.
I have not heard that, but certainly something to check.
It's all right.
Anyone else? I'll say, my kind of general thing is, after spending 2 years working on a plan update, in the past, I'm used to feeling done, and this time I don't. But it's not because we didn't do enough stuff. I think we did more stuff, and we found that every time we start delving into a piece, we found more stuff we wanted to do. And the alternative is meet 4 times a month and make the staff not sleep. And meeting 4 times a month is something that we could do, but making the staff not sleep is not something we can do. So I'm having to get myself comfortable with the idea that there are things in here that are still to-do items even at this stage, both for things that I want to deal with and things that we've heard from agencies that they want to see us do. Usually when we get to our final draft, I'm like, yeah, cool, let it go, another 4 years. Well, now we're seeing why there's a 4-year update, and I feel like we'll have things we want to do before we get to a 4-year update. Because some of it, I think, is just the nature of the system is changing faster than it used to. There was a lot of, this is what parks look like, and then what people think a park system is and how they use it is adapting faster to different things. And what we see as our role and what we want to try to tackle, we're solving some problems that were just kind of ignored for a long time. So we're taking on bigger chunks for us to chew. So I want to be clear that the staff have done a ton of work. I'm not saying that you didn't do enough. I'm just saying that we found there's a lot that can be looked into. So we have our work cut out for us continuing, and that's why, I don't want to belabor points too much of, there's stuff that I want to talk about more, but that doesn't mean that we can't move forward with what we have for this stage. I'm just doing a little Zen thing of, okay, it's fine, we can get to it. Right, like I needed more of that. So, that's my thing. Just know that we are aware. And as we mentioned at, I don't know if it was the last meeting or the one before that, not necessarily even restricted to the things called out in the work plan, but those are some major priorities, but there's probably more than that too.
A lot of good stuff.
Anything else? I guess in terms of administrative stuff, when we're normally just doing like a grant or something, the idea of forwarding a consensus is fine. I feel really bad about doing that on this one. I do note that with the timeline you showed, CDC meets soon, but we do have another meeting before the full council adoption. So maybe we should plan on trying to do a formal motion still at a February meeting that can be brought to that full council meeting, even if we're just forwarding as consensus to CDC today. It would be really nice, I think, to be able to record a motion adopting formally if we can.
I would agree, and I am happy to say as an individual that I'm supportive of forwarding, and you know, if others wanna do that too, and we get the two people either online or at home that can email that in, I think that's a good solution.
Yeah, I think we can, it sounds like, at least from what I'm thinking, we can forward to CDC saying it sounds good. I'd just like to get something on record later of vote to say it sounds good as well at some point, but going to CDC through Sue, does anybody have concerns that need to be included at that point? So I think we could say of the 4 that are in the room, and we had 2 that were submitted separately, everyone's pretty comfortable with things, so.
Yeah, it would be good, I need to report on the 21st. In order for this to all go forward, because we're not talking about just this portion of Imagine 2050.
Yes,
We've got
yeah,
a lot.
which is why I don't wanna hold up your process.
Right.
I'd just really like to slip
I think-
something in before your final vote.
I think that'll be perfectly acceptable.
Okay. So,
Thanks.
I think that's the feel of the room, and you know what to do from there.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much to all staff that did a whole bunch of stuff.
This is a really big deal. I mean, this happens once every 10 years, and so we really appreciate the support throughout. We have a short presentation on the planning handbook, if we could just do it. I know we've hit the Bob Mueller rule of 2 hours. But this is shorter presentation than the last one, so.
And he's not here,
so-
so
And
go
I
for
only
it.
have 2 questions.
Okay, good afternoon, good evening, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and Council members. My name is Kevin Fan, and I'm joined here with Colin Kelly and Tracy Kinney, and we will be bringing forward business item 2025-6, which is to approve the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook. So some quick background before we dive in. The Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook has kind of gone concurrently with this planning process, and it is intended to be a complementary document that is intended to provide a lot of technical and procedural language for our regional park implementing agencies. So we previously came to you in October during the MPOS meeting to present a 90% draft update of this planning handbook. And we had kind of just provided what content was within each section, and we intend to do the same thing today as well. Another thing that I should mention quickly is that between the 90% draft presentation at MPOS, we also worked to engage with the Community Development Committee on the 21st of October, as well as with our regional park implementing agencies throughout the months of September and October, and kind of gathering their feedback on this document as well. So I will kind of bring this through, or I'll kind of just present this section by section of what content is within it and the proposed action as well. Okay, moving on. So diving a little deeper into the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook, or the Planning Handbook, this is a complementary document to the Regional Parks and Trails Policy Chapter. This contains a lot of procedural and contextual language that outlines the Regional Parks and Trails system processes and provides a lot of guidance and information that was transferred from the policy plan into this document. The handbook also includes a clarified amendment process, and as we had brought to you last month or the previous months before, the proposed amendment process is that the handbook will be revised every 4 years on the same schedule as the Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan, and in addition to that, there will also be other updates as needed. Some of the key differences is that within the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook, the introduction has kind of listed what content would be deemed as a substantial update that would directly impact or necessitate implementing agency action. That will ultimately require council approval for any changes, and that would go through as a business item. Meanwhile, any resources or tools such as webinars, plan examples, or infographics will be updated on an as-needed basis or when new content becomes available, and that would go through more as an information item throughout the council. Now diving into the different sections of the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook, sections 1 and 2 are the introduction and the system plan. Overall, throughout the entire handbook, some of the key changes or new items being introduced is that a lot of the procedural or contextual language from the policy plan has been moved to this document. In addition to that, there was also the incorporation of graphics and flowcharts to visualize different key processes for the Regional Parks and Trails system. In the introduction, we worked to add contextual language that describes the handbook's purpose, as well as the amendment process, which we covered previously. And in addition to that, the introduction also contains the research and engagement summary that was moved from the policy chapter to the planning handbook. In section 2, which is the system plan, some of the content within this section is added contextual language that regards Minnesota's outdoor recreation system. I'm just going into that in further detail. In addition to that, we also worked to remove and consolidate some of the language regarding Regional Park and Trail System unit classifications, and we consolidated it all into the policy plan or the policy chapter in those one-page descriptions in the other document. And another work in progress that will be added in the future is agency level maps. Once they become available. That's anticipated to be later in 2025 as we work on our system statements. Now I will pass it over to Colin to talk through the next 3 sections of the planning handbook.
Great, yeah, thanks Kevin. So natural systems and climate resiliency is here on slide 3. So what's new? In the natural systems section, we've clarified the system additions process. We've added graphics and narratives summarizing how a park search area or a regional trail search corridor becomes operational. We've realigned the study area criteria to match the primary factors associated with locating and acquisition. And we've strengthened our continued commitment to monitor local and non-local visitation with agency partners. In the climate resilience or resiliency section, recognizing that this is a critical but emerging area of council focus, we've added a placeholder for future resources and processes. The main focus of section 5, planning, is of course on long-range plan requirements and amendment processes. Over the last 2 years or so, we've received a lot of really helpful advice from you all, implementing agencies, other council committees, and of course our agency council long-range plan requirements work group. So what's new? We've got a few things to share with you here. The long-range plan requirements were reorganized and streamlined into 3 main categories, and simple checklists were integrated into the handbook for easy reference. Plan requirements were reorganized into 3 primary categories or buckets, including engagement, development concept, and natural systems. Design considerations for long-range plans were updated to reflect the direction from Imagine 2050, including expanded multimodal access, context-sensitive and nature-based approaches, and uplifting community connections to the outdoors. Because this content has a close connection to the higher order content of Imagine 2050, well, design considerations was also elevated within the planning handbook space. In addition, the planning handbook includes criteria and processes for 3 different types of long-range plan amendments, including a full amendment, a focused amendment, and an administrative process for minor amendments. As part of this work, the handbook includes clarified criteria and processes for boundary adjustments. This includes connecting the range of amendments to the boundary adjustment thresholds, and recognizes in the case of regional trails, that implementing them on the landscape occasionally means small shifts in alignments. Finally, the language on joint powers agreements is now included in the planning handbook. And with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Tracy.
Thanks, Colin. On to section 6, system protection. This section correlates to the policy plan that speaks to the ways that the Met Council protects public investment in the regional parks and trails system. Similar to the policy plan, there are no substantial changes here. There's added and clarified procedural and contextual language from the policy plan in this section. This content includes local comprehensive plans, land conversion processes, and telecommunications towers placement. And lastly, there is added process graphics that include requirements for the land conversion process. There are existing requirements packaged in, these are existing requirements packaged in a way to better communicate our current needs. Section 7, this is the last section of the planning handbook on recreation, facilities, and programming. New items for this section include added procedural language and graphics describing the process to evaluate and add new recreational activities and facilities. This language was refined because it was moved from the policy plan. And added desired outcome examples for actions 1 through 4. Also moved from the policy plan. And lastly, this section includes the Met Council's commitment to continue trail system coordination, the trail system coordination work group. Some work plan highlights here include coordination with the Regional Bicycle Transportation Network, improved wayfinding, awareness of regional trails, and a coordinated approach to grow the system. So this wraps up the new content within the planning handbook. So the proposed action before you is that the Metropolitan Council established the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook as the administrative guide for regional parks and trails long-range planning requirements. So 2, adopt the attached Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook. 3, authorize council staff to make administrative changes to the handbook over time, including additions and updates to related tools and resources. And 4, direct council staff to bring any updates that directly impact or necessitate implementing agency action related to sections 3, 5, 6, and 7 of the planning handbook to the council for approval, aligning with any updates to the Regional Parks and Trails policy plan. And with that, we thank you so much for your participation and work on the planning handbook. We welcome your support and your comments and questions.
Okay. Questions?
Always. But only 3. So page 10, line 26. I think you've added the word Met in there by mistake, because I think it's the Park and Trails Council of Minnesota.
Yes.
I do read this stuff. Then, on page 15, line 31, 32, I could be wrong, but I always thought to be classified as a regional trail, you needed at least 40% non-local use. Is that only for the development of a plan? Because it says the use is about 38%. And I know I brought this up before, you know, what happens if it really drops down? Is it then not a regional trail or park anymore?
We currently have no procedure to revisit that question.
Okay.
We have estimates that are included when something is proposed and not currently something to come back to that, and that is perhaps something we should address at some point.
Chair and Commissioner, I just wanted to comment, great question. I think as people become more aware of issues around climate change, people might really start traveling even less. And so we're watching that number very closely, the non-local use. And I also think as supply goes up, people probably will have great options closer to home. So I'm thinking that number is gonna go down. But But drawing a regional audience, you're right, is one of the ways we determine regional significance, so.
It just drew my attention, and this is a great document, you guys did an amazing job. My last question is about the slide, number 6, the photo. I worked for a park department.
Sorry.
I'm never gonna allow that to
I
happen.
looked at that too.
We put
Cecily.
skate blocks everywhere. Is that a skate park? It looks like a staircase to me.
It's a snowboard and he is just catching some air and riding that handrail down. Yeah. Jonathan, they don't let that kind of stuff happen in Three Rivers Park District.
And
do they?
Highland.
No, of course not.
At Highland they do.
Yeah.
Is it?
And Island is probably built into the hill as
Yeah.
an attraction.
No.
Yeah.
That's my son in a nutshell.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Are these pictures actually from within our system or are these stock photos?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, they are from like our Metropolitan Council like parks and trail system photo. I'm not sure if I can pinpoint exactly where this image was taken, but I can get back to you.
Well, the fact that it's shown makes it look like you endorse that behavior, you know, snowboarding down a handrail. I'm sure it happens, but.
Yeah, I don't know.
He's not wearing a helmet.
Also that.
Yeah, we'll talk.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Sue.
if staff are ever in need of a video, I have a hilarious video from Theater Worth Park of my 5-year-old great nephew being hauled up the hill because his dad was teaching him how to ski. And getting him up the hill was the toughest part of the whole process, so there was no, anyway. So if you ever want it, it is very fun. I'm not sure who looks more frustrated, the 5-year-old or the dad.
You know, you could substitute that photo for like a still of that video and put it in there, and that might encapsulate something different for people.
Chair and Commissioners, Anthony Taylor, our commissioner, he had to miss tonight because there was a girls' snowboarding class at Theodore Worth that lost their instructor, so he stepped in at the last minute and had to cancel, so that's just another way to bring full circle that.
Wow, there's snow in the Twin Cities?
There's great snow making in
They can
Theodore
make
Worth,
it.
yeah.
Okay. Anything else? I was wondering, you mentioned agency level maps and you've also talked about how some of these updates and planning things are tied into your ongoing GIS project. And I was wondering, as part of that, sort of tied to administrative updates of resources, although it doesn't necessarily go in here, on our website, there's a map of the system. Will it be possible with the new GIS stuff to potentially generate that map automatically on a more regular basis? Since the current one is dated 2017? Like, I know making a map manually is a ton of work, but is there, with the new GIS, would you be able to just have it churn out a new one every month?
Chair and Commissioners, let me just say, I don't know, but we are investing heavily in our GIS data, and the agencies are, with the expectation that there will be big payoffs and more regular updates. Cause like right now, our map that was 2017, you said?
Yep.
I think that's right.
August.
It's not up to date. I mean, the regional trail system has blown up since then, and we really need to figure out a way to do that differently. And you know, moving maybe away from some of the hard copy maps, even though I love them, and into more of the handheld mobile device maps is a critical step, and we're really working on it. The park agencies are really working on
I mean, even if you're not gonna do a fresh run of printing the hard copy ones, just updating the PDF that's on the website would be good.
Good point.
So yeah, just thinking about all these things that we're making investments in, you wanna go tell people, hey, this is here now, you should go check it out.
Because there's some regional parks that don't have Wi-Fi coverage.
Well, and also just for people sitting at home going, hey, I should go to a park, what's available? Like, well, if there's a trail that we spent millions of dollars to build and it's not on the map, they won't go to it. We should fix that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We're working on it.
Anything else? I think,
Mr. Chair, I just want to let you know that I took a look at the creative asset library of the Metropolitan Council, the photos that we've used throughout this presentation. And it appears that this photo has come from a location known as Baker Park. I believe that's in Three Rivers Park District.
It's impossible.
Looks like Phelan.
We'll see.
The building in the background.
Exhibit
They don't
A.
have that.
That's fantastic.
There's something about.
And I think similarly on this, we're saying this all seems fine to us. We should do a formal item on our next meeting if we can. But similarly to Sue, sounds like everybody in the room is fine with what we're looking at so far.
We'll figure out what to do and I'll talk to you, Chair.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, staff.
Thank you.
A whole bunch there. So with that, we go on to our reports. Just in case I forget it later, something that we need on our agenda at the next one will be appointment of a vice chair. Do you know whether we expect to have the reappointments or new appointments of our expiring seats done by then?
Next meeting?
Yeah.
Well, it just so happens that the council member and I were discussing interview times for the 4 seats that are open, which includes 2 of our commissioners tonight, Chris and Cecily, but also Amanda Doerr and Anthony Taylor. I don't know that we'll be able to do the interviews and then move the item formally, so I think putting that off a month, if that's okay, or if you want to just appoint someone from districts A through D.
That's a possibility. I'm just out thinking of who, we've tried to cycle through different people, so yeah. Those are both options.
Okay.
But then the other piece of that is we should talk about a bylaw amendment related to that process because that gets messed up every year in one way or another.
Do it later.
Both a combination of potentially writing it in as later and just changing the wording, because right now it says actually our first regular meeting in January, which means that if we put it off because it's close to New Year's, it's a special meeting and that meeting doesn't exist.
This first meeting.
So we gotta fix that. And then also putting language for having the previous appointment run through until a successor is named, so regardless of when it happens, we have one on file.
Got it.
So, yeah, just administrative edits.
Quick
Because
question,
it's never been done the way it says.
I don't know enough about this, but can you do that, or is that in some way governed by either the governor's office or the Secretary of State's office?
Nope, that's just by this body.
Okay.
Yep. Council. I think it might require a supermajority to do that edit. I'm not sure, I'd have to look. But it's just us.
We actually updated the bylaws relatively recently, just a few years ago, but I don't really remember what year, but I could figure it out.
Yeah.
It's 2020 something.
The other thing is we should maybe consider posting those on the commission portion of the council website.
Okay.
Because currently the only way I have to find those is to search through my email and our old business items for the last time we amended them. And that's not great. I know they live on a file share somewhere here at the council, but we don't have access to that.
Yeah.
So I always have to go looking for them. Yeah. Yeah, but the position of the vice chair, I don't think is even mentioned in statute. I I don't think. So yeah, that's just our own thing that we made up. And the rest of the bylaws are all just organizational things. Yeah, so that's the only thing I have. Any other commissioners? Yes, Cecily.
Washington County is starting another regional trail long-range plan for Battle Creek, St. Croix River. And I'll be serving on that technical advisory committee. Who from the council is?
I'll be serving on that.
Great,
Our brand new regional trail plan.
nice. I don't know if a meeting's been set up yet, it's supposed to be later this month.
So that must be an east-west trail segment then? Okay.
Go through East Maplewood, Woodbury, and Afton.
Is that anticipated to end essentially right by the state park then?
I don't know yet.
Which, I mean, obviously they don't have an alignment, but roughly.
TBD, they have a rough alignment, yep, running from Battle Creek to Afton.
What did you say the name of that trail was gonna be?
Battle Creek, St. Croix River Regional Trail.
Formerly known as the Afton Bluffs Regional Trail Search Corridor.
That's it.
I knew Afton was in there somewhere, but that's all, that's yesterday's news.
Okay. Anyone else?
Motion dismissed.
We can't do that yet. Sue? Staff?
I just have 30 or 40 minutes here. I'm just kidding. Two quickies, the legislative session begins on Monday. Well, it's gonna be interesting, a lot of uncertainty there. For how the two bodies will operate. I think the governor will be releasing his budget relatively soon, as early as next week, but TBD. And then something that we already mentioned is just looking to schedule MPOS commissioner interviews for districts E, F, G, and H. And we're looking at Thursday, January 23rd. So wondering if we can nail down a time sometime between 3 and 5-ish, if that works for people. Otherwise, we'll find another date. But I'll talk to Chris and Cecily maybe right after this meeting, and we'll find you a time. Oh, great.
Because it's virtual, right?
It's virtual, yep. We'll make it short too.
That's fine.
Oh, thank you. Well, okay, we're in good shape. That's all I have.
Okay. Then we can adjourn. Thanks for the longer meeting, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.